Previously on the Zubby channel. Run, Evie! I thought for sure we were going to win that one. But don't worry, I have a new plan. We're going to evolve you. But which stone should we use? Firestone? Thunderstone? Or Waterstone?
While we wait for Ash and Eevee to make a decision, we're going to make miniature Pokemon evolution stones, or element stones, or evolutionary stones. The name has changed several times over the years, so pick whichever one you like best. The materials you'll need to make this project are a low temperature glue gun. I guess you can use a high temperature one as long as you're careful. Glue sticks, scissors. I will also be using an X-Acto knife, but that's optional. Parchment paper, which is not the same thing as wax paper, paintbrush, and acrylic paint. I'll be using a variety of apple barrel craft paint that you can buy from a place like Walmart, and some Tamiya clear paints I had to buy online. Links to where you can get some of those materials and the exact colors I'm using will be in the video description. The first thing we need to do is cut 2 rectangles out of the parchment paper. The size really doesn't matter. Then apply some hot glue to one of the rectangles. I just apply the glue using a back and forth movement. It doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to cover the hot glue with another layer of parchment paper. And while the glue is still warm, smooth it down with your fingers to achieve a consistent thickness. Just keep in mind that the harder you press, the thinner your stones will end up. Allow the glue a few minutes to cool, and then the parchment paper will peel right off. Now, if you used wax paper instead of parchment paper, your glue probably has a few pieces of paper stuck to it. Now, parchment paper is the stuff you can put in the oven and bake cookies on. It's more expensive than wax paper, but it's worth it. Next, I cut the glue blob into 3 pieces with my scissors. I then take one of those smaller pieces and just start chopping off angled pieces from it. You'll repeat this process with the other 2 pieces of glue as well. I want the ending piece to be roughly, I'd say 1 centimeter long and maybe 7 millimeters wide. I'm really just using some rough estimates because it looks like from the cartoon that the Thunderstone is a little bit bigger than Ash's hand. You can make your stones though any size you want. I notice each evolution stone has a unique shape. So I'm going to try to make these 3 stones a little different from each other. But basically just keep chopping off angled pieces until you have a shape that looks interesting. The next step is optional, but I'm going to give my evolution stones a bit more dimension by using an X-Acto knife to trim off angled pieces from the side of the stone. You want to make sure you're really careful while you're doing this though. I double check to make sure that the stone looks like a decent size once it's in my action figure's hand. This figure of Ash is a fairly recent one made by Tomy, and at the time of this video anyway, I believe it's still available in stores and on Amazon. There's a review of him on my channel if you want more information about him, and I'll have a link to his Amazon listing in my video description. At this point, the stone isn't very impressive. It just looks like a blob of glue, because, well, that's exactly what it is. That all changes though once we add some paint. You can use any type of acrylic paint you want on your evolution stones, but I'm going to try to remember to mention the colors I'm using. I'm going to start with the Firestone by adding a little red flame to the middle of it using the clear red paint. This is going on a little thinner than I like, but I'll just add more coats of paint to it once this layer is dry. I'm using tweezers to hold the stone because it's so tiny. Next, I add an orange flame next to the red one, using my clear orange paint. The remainder of the stone, including the back, I paint with clear yellow. I think I ended up painting maybe 2 to 3 layers of clear paint for each color on this particular Firestone. After all of those layers of paint are dry, I'm going to dry brush on some apricot orange acrylic paint to the side faucets of the stone to add a bit more detail. I do this by putting some paint on my brush and wiping most of it off on a paper towel. You're better off using less paint than you'd think, because it's so much easier to add more paint later on than to try to get off excess. Next, let's paint the Thunderstone. Originally, I painted a lightning bolt on it in metallic Inca Gold, but, well, it didn't show up after I applied the layer of green paint. So I'm going to recommend that you just start with the green. I always wondered why the Thunderstone was green. You think yellow would make more sense, but then maybe it would look too much like the Firestone. I don't know. Or it could be meant to represent how, like, when a really bad storm is on its way, the sky will sometimes get that kind of greenish tint to it. Or maybe that's just a Midwestern thing, because if you see that color of sky around here, you know it's time to grab your pets and head down to the basement before your house ends up being blown to Oz. I think I forgot to hit record on my camera when I painted the Thunderbolt the second time on the Thunderstone, so let's just pretend that this stone is already green. To make the lightning bolt, just paint 3 angled lines and have the points of the 2 ending lines thinner than where they touch the middle line. I'm also going to add some shading to the Thunderstone by dry brushing on some Parakeet green paint to the sides. Last but not least is the Waterstone. I start by painting some bubbles with blue cotton paint. Unlike the Thunderbolt, these showed up better after I applied the clear blue paint. This first layer of clear blue paint is too thin, but I gave my paint bottle a really good shake and it came out much better on the second coat. And then I just dry brushed on some blue cotton paint to the sides. Then, to protect my paint and give everything a nice shiny sparkly appearance, I brush on some satin varnish. I recommend that you coat the top of the stones and allow them time to dry before flipping them over and painting the backside. After the varnish is dry, you're done. But before we check back in with Ash and Evie, I have some photos to share from viewers like you who gave some of my past projects a try. Up first is Kuro, who made the firewall effect, and Harley Quinn rewarded that effort by setting a laptop on fire. That girl be crazy. Next is Kingly Tito on Instagram, who sent me these photos of the spider sense effect going into good use by Spidey. The final photos are from Freddy. That's a bit of a tongue twister. Freddy made the ice effect, and it looks like Iceman is enjoying showing off. I think you all did great, and thanks for sending me your pictures. If you want to try any of these projects yourself, check out my Crafting for Action Figures and Other Toys playlist for the instructions. And if you do make any of my projects, I'd love to see your photos too. You can just link them in the comments down below, or send them to me on a social networking site. Just remember to say whether or not I have your permission to share the photos. Now let's find out what evolution stone Evie picked.
All right, buddy. Let's try this again.
Vaporeon. That seems like a wise choice. You can tell Evie made that one and not Ash. If you want to be updated on future projects, you can hit that subscribe button. And thanks for watching.